A wolf dog saved a lost boy in the snowstorm, but no one expected what happened next. Snowflakes drifted lazily from the sky, settling like soft whispers on the tall pine trees. The Alaskan wilderness stretched endlessly, blanketed in white, untouched and peaceful. In the heart of it all, a small wooden cabin stood against the storm, smoke curling from its chimney. Inside, the warmth of a crackling fire filled the air, but 7-year-old Liam Carter sat quietly by the window, watching the snow pile up outside. Liam was different from most kids. He didn't talk much, not because he didn't know how, but because the words always felt trapped inside him. Ever since his mother passed away when he was 3, the world had become quieter for him. His father, Mark Carter, loved him dearly, but love alone couldn't always fill the spaces where words should be. Instead, Liam found his voice in drawing. He carried his worn-out sketchbook everywhere, filling its pages with pictures of the one thing that made him feel safe: wolves. "Hey, buddy," Mark called, setting down a steaming mug of cocoa on the table. "Still drawing?" Liam nodded, his pencil gliding across the page. This time, he was sketching a large black wolf standing in the snow, its eyes calm but powerful. He had never seen a wolf like that in real life, but somehow he felt like it existed, somewhere. Mark ruffled Liam's soft brown hair. "You really love wolves, huh?" Liam finally looked up and pointed at his drawing. "Protectors," he whispered. Mark's chest tightened. His son rarely spoke, and when he did, it was always something important. Outside, the snow deepened and the wind began to pick up. Mark glanced out the window. "Storm's rolling in faster than I thought," he muttered. This trip to Liam's grandfather's old hunting cabin was supposed to be a short getaway. Just father and son, away from town, away from everything. Mark hoped it would help Liam feel a little freer, a little braver, but now looking at the sky, he knew they wouldn't be going anywhere for a while. Later that afternoon, Liam bundled up in his thick winter coat, snow boots, and gloves. Mark let him play just outside the cabin while he stacked firewood. Liam loved the quiet crunch of the snow beneath his boots. He watched a small rabbit dart across the clearing, leaving a trail of paw prints behind. His eyes followed the tracks, curiosity sparking inside him. Then, without thinking, he took a step forward, and another, and another. The rabbit's tracks weaved through the trees and Liam followed, his fingers gripping his sketchbook tightly. His father's voice was far behind him now, but he didn't realize it. He just wanted to see where the rabbit went. But something changed. The snow began falling faster. The trees became thicker. The rabbit was gone. Liam turned around to head back, but suddenly nothing looked familiar. His heart pounded. He spun in a circle, but all he could see was white. The wind howled through the trees, erasing any trace of his footsteps. His fingers clenched the sketchbook tighter as panic started to creep into his chest. Then, for the first time in a long time, he tried to call out, "Dad?" The wind swallowed his voice. Back at the cabin, Mark was finishing his last log when he turned to check on Liam. His stomach dropped. "Liam!" he called, stepping off the porch. His eyes scanned the snowy clearing, empty. Mark's heart pounded against his ribs. "Liam!" No answer. Mark grabbed his coat and flashlight, his mind racing. The storm was growing stronger, the wind sharp against his face. He ran into the trees, his boots sinking deep into the snow. Meanwhile, Liam stumbled forward, his breath coming in short, fast gasps. He had to find his way back. He had to... Then his foot slipped. He fell, tumbling down a small slope, landing hard in the snow. His sketchbook flew from his hands, pages fluttering like lost birds. Pain shot through his knee, but worse than that was the cold creeping into his body. Tears burned in his eyes, but before they could fall, they froze against his skin. Liam curled up beneath a fallen tree, trying to shield himself from the biting wind. His small fingers were stiff, his breathing shallow. Then somewhere in the distance, he heard something. A sound that didn't belong to the storm. A low, deep howl. Liam's frozen fingers clenched into fists. He turned his head slowly. A shadow moved between the trees. It was big. Bigger than any dog Liam had ever seen. A massive black wolf dog stepped into the moonlight, its thick fur dusted with snow. Its piercing golden eyes locked onto Liam's, filled with something ancient and knowing. Most kids would have screamed. Liam didn't move. He could barely feel his own body, but deep inside, he felt something else. A connection. The wolf dog didn't attack. It didn't snarl or growl. It simply watched him as if it had been searching for him. Liam swallowed hard. Very slowly, he reached for the nearest stick and, hands trembling, began drawing in the snow. A circle. 2 ears and 2 eyes. A wolf. The wolf dog tilted its head, its ears twitching. Then it took a step closer. Liam's breath hitched. Another step, and another. Then the wolf dog curled its massive body around him, shielding him from the wind. For the first time since he got lost, Liam wasn't afraid anymore. As the storm raged on, the boy and the beast remained there, silent protectors of each other. Somewhere deep in the forest, a new bond was forming, a bond that would change both their lives forever.
The storm howled through the trees, its icy fingers reaching into every crack and crevice of the frozen wilderness. Snow swirled in the air like ghosts dancing in the night. But beneath a fallen tree, in a small pocket of shelter, Liam Carter lay shivering, his tiny body curled into itself. The cold had settled deep into his bones. His hands ached, stiff and unmoving. His breath came in shallow puffs, fogging the air around him. He knew he had to stay awake, but his eyelids felt heavy, his body desperate for rest. Next to him, the massive black wolf dog, the silent shadow that had appeared out of nowhere, shifted closer. Its thick fur, dusted with snow, pressed against Liam's side. Its breath was warm, steady, alive. Liam had never been this close to a wild animal before, but strangely, he wasn't afraid. He felt safer than he had in a long time. The wolf dog, Liam decided to call him, stayed completely still, his golden eyes watching the boy carefully. He had lived in these forests long enough to know the dangers of winter. He had seen the way the cold could steal life away, and he wasn't going to let that happen. Slowly, Shadow curled his large body around Liam, shielding him from the relentless wind. His thick fur acted as a barrier, trapping what little warmth the boy had left. Liam, barely able to move his fingers, reached out and gently touched Shadow's fur. "You're real," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the wind. Shadow huffed softly, a sound that wasn't quite a growl but wasn't a bark either. It was something in between, a language of its own, a silent promise, and in that moment, Shadow made a choice. He would protect this small human, no matter what. Back at the cabin, Mark Carter's heart pounded in his chest. The storm had swallowed the land whole. Snow was falling so fast it was nearly impossible to see. The flashlight in his hand barely cut through the darkness, its weak beam flickering as the wind howled around him. He had called Liam's name until his voice was hoarse, but there was no answer. No sign of his son. Mark clenched his fists, his breath coming out in short, panicked bursts. He couldn't lose him. Not Liam, not after everything. His mind raced back to the last time he had seen his boy, standing in the snow, drawing in his sketchbook. Liam had always been quiet, always lost in his own world. Mark had worried about him, but he had never imagined something like this would happen. A sharp gust of wind nearly knocked him off balance. He had to keep searching. Somewhere out there, his son was alone, freezing, and Mark had to find him before it was too late. Liam's body felt heavy, his hands wouldn't move, his legs wouldn't move. Somewhere in the back of his mind, he knew that was bad. He had seen it before, on TV and books, the way people froze when they stayed in the cold for too long. But Shadow was still there, still warm. Liam wanted to thank him, to say something, but he couldn't form the words. His mind was drifting. The cold was trying to pull him into sleep. But then, a sound. Not the wind, not the storm, a deep, low howl. Liam's eyes fluttered open, just enough to see Shadow sitting up, his ears pricked forward. The wolf dog let out another long, drawn-out howl, the sound carrying through the frozen air. Liam didn't know much about wolves, but he knew that sound meant something. It was a call, a signal, maybe even a warning. Shadow's golden eyes flickered down to Liam before he did something surprising. He nuzzled Liam's cheek with his cold, wet nose. A push, a message. Stay awake. Liam shivered violently, but the small burst of contact jolted him back to awareness. He wasn't alone. Shadow was trying to help him. And even though Liam's fingers barely worked, he did the only thing he could think of. He reached out and drew. Not on paper, not with a pencil, but with a shaky finger in the snow. A rough, uneven circle, 2 pointy ears, a wolf. Shadow's ears twitched as he watched, then very softly he let out a quiet huff of approval. Liam smiled weakly, and somehow that small moment gave him the strength to keep fighting. The first light of dawn hours passed. The storm raged on, but something was changing. The wind wasn't as sharp, the sky wasn't as dark. The first hints of morning light were breaking through the heavy clouds. Liam was barely conscious, but he felt it, felt the change, and so did Shadow. The wolf dog stood up suddenly, his ears flicking toward the trees. His nose twitched, catching something in the air. A scent, a voice. Liam's eyes opened, but he was too weak to call out. His lips parted, but no sound came. Shadow understood. He turned toward the sound, let out a powerful bark, and then he ran. Mark stumbled through the snow, his entire body numb with fear. And then a black blur burst from the trees. Mark froze. His breath caught in his throat. A wolf. No, a wolf dog. The massive animal stared at him, golden eyes burning like fire against the white snow. Mark's hand instinctively went to the knife on his belt, his body tensing. But then the wolf dog turned, and once, twice, then it ran back into the trees. And in that moment, Mark understood. He followed. His legs burned, his breath ragged, but he pushed forward, chasing the animal through the storm until he saw him. A small figure curled beneath a fallen tree. Liam. Mark dropped to his knees beside his son, his shaking hands brushing the snow off Liam's face. His heart nearly stopped. His skin was pale, his lips blue. But then a weak breath and the faintest whisper, "Dad." Mark choked back a sob. He pulled Liam into his arms, his body flooding with relief. And standing a few feet away, watching, waiting, was Shadow. Mark met the wolf dog's eyes, and for the first time he truly saw him. Not as a threat, not as an enemy, but as the reason his son was still alive. "Thank you," Mark whispered, his voice breaking. Shadow blinked. Then, after a long moment, he turned and disappeared into the trees. But Liam, weak and barely awake, knew the truth. Shadow wasn't gone. He would always be watching. Mark Carter barely felt the cold as he ran through the snow, his son limp in his arms. His breath came in ragged gasps and his legs burned from exhaustion. But he didn't stop. He couldn't stop. Liam was alive, but his body was dangerously cold, his breathing shallow. Mark pressed a shaking hand to Liam's cheek. It was like touching ice. Behind him, the storm had finally begun to ease, the wind no longer howling like a hungry beast. But Mark knew he wasn't out of danger yet. The nearest hospital was miles away, and Liam needed warmth now. His only chance was the cabin. Mark tightened his grip on his son and pushed forward, stumbling through the deep snow. His eyes stung from the wind, his fingers numb, but he could just barely make out the glow of the cabin's porch light in the distance. Almost there. The sound of crunching snow followed him. At first, Mark thought it was his own footsteps, until he realized the pattern was off. He glanced over his shoulder and felt his breath hitch. The wolf dog was still following. Its massive form moved silently, golden eyes locked on Liam. Snow clung to its thick black fur and steam rose from its breath, but it made no move to attack. Mark swallowed hard, his heart pounding. This animal had saved his son. But that didn't mean it wasn't dangerous. Still, he didn't have time to think about it now. With one final burst of energy, he staggered onto the porch and kicked the door open. Heat rushed out, slamming against his frozen skin. He rushed inside, slamming the door shut behind him. Outside, the wolf dog stopped. It stood motionless, staring at the closed door, its ears flicking forward. Snow continued to fall, coating its fur, but it didn't move. Then, after a long moment, it turned and disappeared into the trees. Mark laid Liam down on the couch near the fire, his hands shaking as he grabbed every blanket he could find. He stripped off his son's wet clothes, replacing them with dry ones, then wrapped him up tightly. "Come on, buddy," he whispered, rubbing Liam's hands between his own. "Stay with me." Liam barely stirred. Mark cursed under his breath, grabbing his radio. "Come in. This is Mark Carter. I need immediate medical assistance. My son's suffering from exposure." Static. No response. Mark's stomach twisted. The storm had likely knocked out the signal. He was on his own. He knelt beside Liam, pressing a trembling hand to his forehead. His skin was cold, but there was a faint warmth returning. That was good. But Liam still wasn't waking up. Mark exhaled sharply, his emotions boiling over. He had almost lost him. If that wolf dog hadn't been there. Mark closed his eyes, trying to push away the thought. Instead, he focused on what mattered. He stayed by Liam's side, keeping him warm, whispering soft reassurances and waiting for his son to come back to him. Hours passed. The fire crackled softly, casting a warm glow over the cabin. The storm had fully passed now, and the world outside was still, blanketed in thick snow. Mark sat on the edge of the couch, his eyes never leaving Liam's face. He barely realized how exhausted he was. His body ached, his mind felt heavy, but he refused to sleep. Then, a soft sound. Mark's head snapped up. Liam's eyes were fluttering open. Liam, Mark leaned forward, his heart pounding. Liam blinked slowly, his gaze unfocused. Then, his lips parted, and a single whisper escaped. Shadow. Mark froze. What? Liam swallowed, his voice hoarse, barely above a whisper. The dog, he murmured. Shadow. Mark felt his chest tighten. His son had just spoken a name, something he had never done before. Liam had always been selective with his words, speaking only when it truly mattered. And now, after everything, the first thing he said was the name of that wolf dog. Mark let out a shaky breath, brushing Liam's damp hair from his forehead. He saved me, Dad, Liam whispered. He stayed with me. Mark nodded slowly, his throat thick with emotion. I know, buddy, he murmured. I know. The next morning, Liam was stronger. His color had returned, and though he was still weak, he was awake and alert. He sat on the couch, wrapped in blankets, watching the fire flicker. Mark hadn't left his side, but something was bothering Liam. Every few minutes, he glanced toward the frosted window, his small hands gripping his blanket tightly. What is it, bud? Mark asked gently. Liam hesitated. Then, he's out there. Mark frowned. Who? Liam turned, his expression serious. Shadow. Mark felt a chill crawl up his spine. Slowly, he rose to his feet and moved to the window. His breath fogged up the glass as he peered outside. For a long moment, he saw nothing but white. The sun had risen, casting a soft golden glow over the snow-covered landscape. The trees stood silent, their branches heavy with ice. But then, a shadow moved at the edge of the forest. Mark's breath caught in his throat. The wolf dog was there. Its massive form stood partially hidden behind the trees, its golden eyes glowing in the morning light, watching, waiting. Liam slid off the couch and stood beside his father, pressing his small hand against the cold window. Mark expected fear in his son's eyes. Instead, he saw understanding and something deeper, a bond. The wolf dog wasn't just watching, he was protecting. Mark exhaled slowly. He didn't fully understand what had happened out there in the storm, but one thing was clear. That animal had saved Liam's life. And now? Now it wasn't leaving. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Mark's fingers curled into a fist. For years he had worried about Liam, his struggles, his silence, his loneliness. He had spent so much time searching for a way to reach his son. And now, in the most unexpected way, it seemed like someone or something already had. Liam placed his hand on the glass, his breath fogging up the surface. Then, as if sensing the boy's presence, Shadow turned. And without a sound, he slipped back into the trees. Gone. For now. But Liam knew the truth. He'd be back. He'd always be watching, because Shadow had made a promise. A silent one. And he intended to keep it. For the next few days, Liam barely left the window. The moment he woke up, he would shuffle to the couch, blanket wrapped around his small frame, and stare outside. His eyes scanned the tree line, searching. Waiting. Shadow was out there. Liam knew it. Mark wasn't sure what to do. He wanted to protect his son, to keep him away from danger, but something held him back. He saw something in Liam he hadn't seen in a long time. Determination. Focus. A connection to something bigger than himself. Liam had always been quiet, locked away in his own world. But now he was awake. Still, Mark worried. We can't just let a wild animal hang around, he muttered to himself one evening as he threw another log into the fire. His fingers twitched toward the hunting rifle mounted above the fireplace, a habit he had built living in the wilderness. But then he glanced at Liam, who was curled up with his sketchbook, drawing again. And Mark saw what was on the page. Not just any wolf. Shadow. drawn in fine detail, with golden eyes and fur dusted with snow. Not a monster, not a threat, a protector. Mark's chest tightened. Maybe he was the one who had been wrong all along. On the fourth morning after the storm, Liam woke up before sunrise. A deep feeling in his chest told him this was the day. He slipped out of bed quietly, careful not to wake his dad. The floor was cold under his feet as he padded toward the window, pulling back the curtain. And there he was. Shadow, standing at the edge of the forest, his massive frame half hidden in the mist. His golden eyes glowed in the dim light. Liam's heart pounded. For a second, he just stood there, staring. Then, before he could stop himself, he ran to the door. His hands fumbled with the locks, his breath coming in excited gasps. The cold hit him like a slap when he stepped outside, but he didn't care. "Shadow," he whispered. The wolf dog's ears perked up at the sound of his voice. Liam took one step forward, then another. The snow crunched under his boots, but he barely felt it. Shadow didn't move. He just waited. Then, very slowly, he sat down. A silent invitation. Liam's small hands clenched into fists at his sides. His heart beat wildly in his chest. And then he did something he had never done before. He ran. Right into the snow. Right towards Shadow. Mark jolted awake at the sound of the door slamming. His heart stopped when he saw Liam outside, running straight into the woods. "Liam!" Panic surged through him as he grabbed his coat, rushing after his son. But then he stopped, because he saw it. Liam wasn't alone. Shadow was there, and instead of attacking or running away, he was waiting. Mark's breath caught in his throat as he watched his son kneel in the snow and reach out his small hand. For a long, frozen moment, neither of them moved. Then, Shadow leaned forward and let Liam's fingers sink into his thick fur. A single, quiet touch, a silent promise. Liam's lips curved into a soft, peaceful smile. And for the first time in a long, long time, Mark understood. Shadow wasn't just some wild animal. He wasn't just a wolf dog. He was something more, a guardian. As the days passed, Shadow became a part of their world. He never stepped onto the porch, never tried to enter the cabin, but he was always there, lingering at the tree line, watching. And Liam? Liam had changed. His words came a little easier. His laughter wasn't as rare. He smiled more. Mark saw it in everything he did. The way he ran outside every morning to check if Shadow was there. The way he talked to him in soft whispers, even though the wolf dog never spoke back. But Mark also knew the truth. Shadow was still wild. And sooner or later, something would happen to remind them of that. It happened on a bitterly cold afternoon. Liam was playing just beyond the trees, his boots kicking up small sprays of snow as he laughed. Shadow sat nearby, his golden eyes following the boy's every move. Then, a sharp, piercing cry. Shadow's ears snapped forward, his body tensed. Then, before Liam could even react, the wolf dog launched forward, disappearing into the trees. Liam's heart pounded. He spun toward the cabin. "Dad!" Mark came rushing outside, gripping his coat. "What happened?" "Shadow. He ran into the woods." Liam gasped, eyes wide with fear. "Something's wrong." Mark hesitated. A part of him knew they shouldn't follow. It wasn't their world. But then he saw Liam's face. His son had never looked at anything the way he looked at that wolf dog. Mark exhaled sharply. "Come on." They ran, through the trees, through the snow, following Shadow's tracks. Then, they saw it. A small fox trapped in a hunting snare. Its leg was tangled in thick wire, blood staining the snow around it. The fox thrashed, letting out soft, pitiful cries. And standing over it was Shadow. His fur was bristling, his lips curled back in a low snarl, but he didn't attack. Instead, he paced, circling the fox, huffing, growling, but never striking. Mark's breath caught. He recognized what was happening. Shadow wasn't hunting. He was trying to help. Liam rushed forward before Mark could stop him. "Wait, Liam." But the boy wasn't afraid. He knelt down in the snow, just a few feet away from Shadow, his hands shaking. "Dad," he whispered, "we have to help." Mark hesitated. His instinct screamed, no, this was wildlife. This wasn't their place. But then he looked at Shadow, and Shadow looked back, not at him, at Liam. Then, without a sound, Shadow stepped back. He was trusting them. Mark swallowed hard. "All right," he said quietly. "Let's do this." Together, father and son worked carefully, loosening the wire, freeing the fox. When it finally limped away, disappearing into the trees, Liam turned to Shadow with wide, grateful eyes. And for the first time, Shadow wagged his tail. Mark let out a soft, disbelieving laugh. And Liam? Liam just smiled, because now he knew. Shadow wasn't just a protector, he was family. Seasons passed. Shadow stayed, not as a pet, not as a captive, but as Liam's guardian. And when Liam grew older and stronger, when he no longer needed protection, Shadow still remained. Not for safety, not for survival, but for love. And so the legend of the silent guardian of the woods lived on. Because sometimes the strongest bonds aren't built with words, but with promises kept in the quiet.